Welcome to Ramp's Bill Pay Overview. Today we're going to cover the initial setup of your bill pay in Ramp, as well as vendor migration and bill lifecycle, and we'll also walk through creating a bill together. All right, here we are in the Ramp dashboard in the Bill Pay tab. Now, to initially set up your account, the first place that we will do that is using these three dots here. We are going to go to the Settings tab. The first thing that you'll set up are the payment section. This is going to be the bank account where Ramp will pull the funds from to pay your bills. You'll select that account here, make sure it's enabled, and then select the QuickBooks or other accounting cash account, how you refer to this bank account in your accounting provider. Next, we're going to go to the permissions tab. Now, by default, admins will be the only users able to interact and see the bill pay tab at all. If you'd like to add another user of a different role to engage with bill pay, submit bills, code, anything along those lines, you'll want to give them the AP clerk permission. So you'll go ahead and select their name and then add them, and you'll see the list below. By default, all owners and admins will have access to the bill pay tab, but anyone else would need to be added here. Next, let's talk through approvals. So here you'll see the ability for you to edit the approval workflow for your bills. So if we go into edit workflow, you'll see the ability to get very granular about how you choose to set workflows for approval. The first thing that we recommend is actually to include a vendor owner in your approval workflow. Now, the vendor owner is an internal employee that is responsible for maintaining the relationship that you have with that vendor. It's a good idea to make the vendor owner a very beginning part of any approval because they are the first gatekeeper to signify the validity of any invoices that are submitted. From there, you can choose to require a specific person. You can require a lot of different titles within Ramp or specific people. So say Dana in finance is someone you want to approve all bills. You can go ahead and put them in your approval workflow there. Then if additionally you would like more scrutiny, say if a bill is above a certain dollar threshold, you can certainly add a condition in here and choose if the amount is greater than or equal to, and let's call it $2,500. And then the next step would be to add any approvers. You can choose whom this would be, a vendor owner manager. You can have custom owners. All of that's listed here. For now, let's keep vendor owner manager. Let's also add any admin. Now, if you see here, keeping both of these in the same tally will make an or situation. However, you simply can change it to require all, and then it would be an and situation. So both of these users would need to approve this bill. Now, if the bill amount is greater than say 5,000, you can then add additional scrutiny below as well. So you can kind of get as custom as you'd like with it. You can also choose to set different conditions in the if condition. But again, we do recommend creating that vendor owner tile as a part of your bill pay approvals. And we'll go in and show you when we create the vendor in Ramp where we're going to designate who that vendor owner is. We're just going to save this workflow. And as you'll see here, there are a couple extra settings. You can decide when a bill would need a reapproval based on any changes that are made as a part of the approval chain. So if there's a change made between step 2 and step 3, then if you toggle certain ones of these on, let's say you make a change to the amount of the bill, that can re-trigger the whole approval process. But let's say you just change the payment method, you can say, if I change the payment method, but everything else remains the same, I don't need additional approvals. Great. You do also have the accounting tab, most likely, in this section. And here you'll be able to choose the sync settings for your bill payments. The first thing you'll select is the accounts payable account, or input this information in. If you have the universal CSV, you'll input the code segment ID, which is the accounting number, and then the name accounts payable. If you're making international payments in a foreign currency, you can choose to include a gain loss account. You can choose when to sync the bills. You have the option of syncing the bill after it is fully approved or after it is created and hasn't yet been fully approved. Now, up to you. You can choose between the two right here in this section. And let's go back. That's complete. And with certain accounting providers, you will see the importing tab here, the ability to import bills and purchase orders depending on your accounting provider. Awesome. So now that we have that initial configuration squared away, the next thing to kind of go over here is the bill pay tab in itself. There are the stages of a bill payment that begin with drafts. Now, drafts are all unscheduled and unapproved bills will live here until you take action to submit them. There are a couple ways for invoices in Ramp. So if you see here, if you click New Bill, you will have an Ramp specific AP email address. You can use this address forward from your email inbox to this AP specific Ramp email address, and all of those invoices will be read by our computer reading software, and then the details will be parsed out and you will see them in the Drafts tab. You can also choose to drag and drop an invoice into this section over here. And if you need to create bills in bulk, you can choose to import via spreadsheet, import those bills, even the line item coding of those bills into Ramp, and be able to draft bills in bulk. You also have, of course, the ability to create a bill without an invoice as well. The next thing that you'll notice is once you've submitted that bill from a draft, you'll see it in the For Approval tab. This For Approval tab will list all of the invoices that have been submitted but not yet received all of the necessary approvals. Next, you'll see the For Payment tab, where all bills will live that have reached all of their approvals, and they'll be in this tab until their scheduled payment date, at which point, once the payment date has passed, they will then be moved into the History tab. Now, the History tab will log all of your paid bills. In this section, you'll also be able to scroll across to get more information about the bills that you have already paid. And you do have the ability to export a CSV with all of your history in that export. So this can be good for budgeting, forecasting, anything along those lines where you want to run a report of all of the AP bills you've processed. And so that can be done right from this tab as well. Now, let's talk about adding a new vendor. When you go into create a bill, let's try it with a sample invoice here. In the overview tab, you will now see that sample invoice in your drafts tab. If we click into it, the first step to submitting a bill is to create a vendor. If you don't already have one in your accounting provider, or you haven't already paid for that bill in Ramp yet. So first thing we're gonna do here is create a new vendor. Now Ramp is pulling in this information from the invoice as much as possible. We'll see here that we're also going to be creating a new vendor in QuickBooks. Then we're going to put the state in here. We're going to say New York, and the vendor owner. As I mentioned when we were talking about approvals, the vendor owner is your internal employee that is responsible for maintaining the relationship with Sassy SaaS vendor. Next thing we're going to input here is the vendor contact information. These fields are very important. We want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date information for your vendor, and we input that in here. So we're going to call this person's first name Jane and the last name Smith, the email address of this vendor. Okay, phone number is not as an optional field. Now, the next thing that we are going to input are the payment details. Now, choosing information here is going to set a default for this vendor, but you can change what payment method you're planning to use on the individual invoice level. So let's go ahead and choose those here. If you don't have the payment information for your vendor, you can actually request Ramp to retrieve those securely for you. How that works is once you submit the bill for approval, it's reached all of its approvals and it's now a scheduled bill, Ramp will send this email address an email inviting them to join our vendor portal, at which point they would be able to input their own payment details and the bill would be able to be completed based on the details they input. For now, we're going to choose the ACH payment. Now, as you can see here, the account number, which happened to be pulled from this invoice listed here, the routing number as well. And of course, we're going to have to confirm the accounting number, confirm the name of the vendor and the vendor type. Once we've done that, we're going to just save here. The next thing that you will notice is now you have the vendor contact details in there. You can choose also, if you have the tax details, to input them now or request them from the vendor, or just simply skip for now. Awesome. The next thing we're going to do is press continue here. And then it just gives you an overview. David Wallace, that is actually my name on this demo account, is the vendor owner. And then the vendor contact is Jane Smith. That looks correct to me. We're going to go ahead and create vendor. Now that we've created the vendor, what we're doing now is separate from that vendor creation. What we're doing now is specific to this actual invoice. And so in subsequent invoices, because we already have created the Sassy SaaS vendor, what we will do is match that invoice to the already created Sassy SaaS vendor and see a page that looks like this. Just to reiterate, you will not need to create a new vendor each time you pay a recurring merchant in bill pay. So the next thing we'll see here, now that we are in this draft tab, we're going to see the invoice number, again, pulled from the invoice date, and the bill's due date. If our due date was, say, November 1st, the payment would reach the vendor the business day before the payment date. So the soonest business day before the weekend date, if you do happen to set a bill due date on the weekend. The description of the invoice, again, pulled from the invoice itself, and then the bill accounting. Now, when it comes to bill pay accounting, you can choose to have line item coding. So if your coding for the sarcasm generator was different than your positivity engine, then you could code those separately, or you can choose to collapse all of the line items and code to a single category. Again, up to you. And you do also have the ability to split however you'd like the coding for your invoice as well. We'll just want to make sure that your invoice total on the right side, of course, matches the invoice total on the left side. Now, when it comes to payment details and how you want to pay this actual vendor, as you might remember, we chose ACH as the default, but there are also quite a few options here. So as you can see, you have the ACH option, check by mail, international wire, paying with a Ramp card, and paying outside of Ramp. Now, if you're choosing the ACH method, you're going to choose, of course, your payment, your bank that the funds will be pulled from, and then the payment bank that the funds will be sent to. Now, you also are able to choose the arrival date. Now, ACH takes up to 5 business days, but sometimes it can be sooner. And you're able to choose if you want, let's say, a payment date of the 24th. It will then automatically adjust the payment date that the funds are pulled from your bank account to accommodate for that new arrival date. So you can schedule it now, but you won't see the debit for that amount until your payment date. Now, one thing to note here is that you do also have the ability in some instances to expedite your ACH payment. Now, there are only 2 fees associated with the use of bill pay, and that is one, if you make an international bill payment, that is a $20 flat rate, and then choosing to expedite your bill payment to same day ACH, that is a $10 flat rate. Other than those 2 fees, everything else is complimentary in use of Ramp Bill Pay. As you can see here, using a check by mail option, again, does have a little bit longer of a delivery time, up to 9 business days. But how that works is that Ramp will pull the ACH from your bank account for the amount of the check, then cut and mail the physical check from Ramp's bank account with your business's details on it and send that to your vendor. And all of that is done from the convenience of your screen. You don't have to worry about printing, signing, or any of those things. All of that is done in Ramp if you choose check by mail. Another thing to note with check by mail, if the vendor does not cash the check in 180 days from the time that you initiate that check to be cut, then the funds would automatically be sent back to your business's linked bank account, and the payment would then be flagged with an error that the payment could not be delivered. Now, as I was mentioning, international wire is an option that does come with that fee, but available to you as well. So you'll just want to choose the payment method. Now, lastly, I do want to highlight that one really great way that you can actually use Ramp Bill Pay is by choosing to pay with a Ramp card. Now you get your cash back that you accrue with that payment method, and you can choose a single use Ramp card. What that would mean is we are going to create a virtual Ramp card for just the amount of that invoice, or you can choose to use an already existing Ramp card that is yours, or someone else's Ramp card, and you'll match the transaction later. Now, the exciting thing is that if you use a single use Ramp card, again, your name is on the name holder on the card, and you can actually choose to have Ramp send the card details directly to the vendor. Now that's going to be via email, and Ramp will deliver that card to the vendor for you. After they complete the payment, the card will automatically lock. And they have 7 days from the time that you issue that card to complete that payment on their end. So if you choose that as the payment method, you can certainly put a memo in here to include with that. The next thing that you will notice is that you will see the approval workflow based on the one that we set initially listed here. All of this looks correct. The next thing that you'll want to do is press continue. It is going to give you that overview of the bill, and we're going to press create here. Once we have created that bill, everything looks correct. Now you'll notice that the bill is now no longer in the drafts tab, but actually in the for approval tab. You can see where you can approve bills here in this for approval tab, but you also have the ability, or admins or whomever is a part of that approval workflow has the ability to go into their inbox. In their inbox, they will also have a bills tab. So the inbox is designed to keep all of your approvals in one place. So if you have transactions to review, reimbursements or bills, or any of the other requests that you could have in Ramp, you can do all of that from this inbox tab. So again, you can approve directly from here, or you can go into the bill pay tab in that for approval section. And now, as you see, one of those approvals has been met for that bill that we have just created. Another cool thing is that in all of these tabs, you will also be able to get a thumbnail overview that shows you the invoice, if that invoice has synced, a lot of the information about the coding, a description, etc. All of this information is at your fingertips from any of these tabs. But once it's reached all of its approvals, it will then show up in the for payment tab. As you can see, this is where scheduled and initiated bills will live until they have been complete, at which point they would then show in the history tab. So there are a couple other cool features I want to show you about using Ramp Bill Pay. And one of those is, let's say in our for approval section, we need to get more information about this Sassy SaaS vendor. One thing you can do is go to the activity tab of any of your bills and leave a comment. So say I want to know from Billjoy, is this the vendor we used for XYZ event? Bill would then get an email that has the contents of the comment and be able to come back into this invoice and leave a comment for me, David. And that whole exchange will live in this invoice. So you will have that additional context that you need to action on your invoices. So really a cool feature there when it comes to bill pay. Additionally, you'll be able to see the payment status like it's baking in a pizza oven. Right here, you'll be able to see as those bills move along the payment processing trajectory and be able to see that all from this section here. Additionally, if you do have recurring bills, Ramp can process recurring bills for you as well. If you go to create new recurring bill, of course, you'll choose the vendor. You'll input the information. Okay, we're going to continue. We're going to create the vendor because that's the first thing we need to do. But now when we're going in to create these recurring bills, you'll see a lot of this is carried over from the regular standard bill creation. But if you scroll down here, you'll be able to designate whether you want those bills to arrive monthly on the 1st, monthly on the 15th, in a custom frequency, quarterly, annually, and how long you want the recurring payments to be sent. So this is a really great option that you can choose to create these recurring bills. You can even choose whether or not you want approvals to be required after the first instance of that recurring bill set. If you do want those bills to need additional approval, you can toggle that on. But now you've set this once, it will automatically create them and send them through the approval process, or automatically pay them once we've completed the first payment. So let's say we want to issue our bills on the 1st and we want to go once ends on 1 year. As you'll see here, you'll have the ability to choose when the first bill is created. Now my day of, it's currently October 23rd. And so the first bill would be November 1st, but you can also change that first bill and have the bill approval date be tomorrow if you're already late. And then you'll see how it will change the trajectory of the recurring bills from that point on. So really cool to set up those recurring bills, set it and forget it, and be able to have that recurring bill processed in Ramp. So as you can see here, you'll see how you're able to have the history of the bill and see how it is processed. Any activity also able to be seen on that bill as well. Now, when it comes to importing your vendors, you can, of course, as I mentioned, do that individually for the first instance of each vendor you're paying using Ramp Bill Pay. But you can also choose by going to the Vendors tab to create one-off vendors without a bill based on the vendors that you have in your QuickBooks, or by creating a new vendor. If you do so, you'll be able to fill out the same information, press continue, and then you'll see that vendor on the left-hand side of your screen. Otherwise, you're also able to bulk import vendors. So if you go into the settings here, you can bulk import your vendors with a CSV that would do the pre-work of creating those vendors. But when you import your first bill, you'll just have to match them to the vendor you created with this CSV file. So a really great way to standardize how you get everything set up in Ramp. And of course, if you do have QuickBooks, you want to import your vendors, it is currently a beta feature. And if you don't see the option here, you would just go into your settings, and into your company settings, you should see a beta icon here, and then enable the beta. You will then get access to that feature if that is important to you. Highly recommend. So now we have this overview. We understand how vendors are created. We understand how bill pay works, how we can optimize, and how we can create automations that save you time, create defaults that will pre-code, see the history of your payments to your vendors, and all within one platform. So as we covered today, the initial setup and configuration, vendor migration, submitting a bill and a bill's lifecycle in Ramp. And thank you for tuning in.